data from people at one point in time, case control studies where you have specific things that you're trying to look at in two different groups, and you're making sure that they're matched on specific types of criteria. Cohort studies where you build a cohort and you're following these same people over time. Randomized controlled trials, which relates to the true experimental design where your sample is randomly selected from your population, and then they're randomly assigned to your treatment or your control condition. And at the very top there is what we call meta-analyses and systematic reviews. And what that is, it's taking, in most cases, ideally looking at randomized control trials for a specific effect of an intervention on specific outcomes that you've identified, and making sure, because the whole principle of science is about replicating. So it's collating all of the RCTs, all of the randomized control trials that have been done that are supposed to be showing the relationship between this intervention, whether the intervention is pharmacological, whether it is health services related, whether it is information related program, whether it's something related to clinical practice. So that intervention and the specific outcomes, it's bringing all of them together, and it's looking to see how big of an effect did that intervention have on that outcome of interest. And then it's looking the meta-analysis. So that's what when you bring together and you look at all of those papers in a systematic way, and by systematic, we mean that you have to identify what we call your PICO, your population, your intervention, your control, and your outcome. And there are specific guidelines for how you do searches of the literature, how you identify your search terms, which search engines you should be using, PubMed, etc. And then once you've done that systematic review, a level above, if you have sufficient number of randomized control trials, is what we call meta-analyses, where you do a statistical analysis of how large the effect is of that intervention on those outcomes across a number of studies. And I mention this because sometimes, particularly when you're now coming into research, you are unaware sometimes of the various types of products that count as evidence generation, that count as research. And these different types of products are related to different types of tasks that you could be assisting with as somebody who wants to contribute to research. So think, for example, of a cohort study or even a cross-sectional study and how you could contribute to that. You could contribute to that in terms of project management, in terms of data collection, in terms of preparing ethics applications, in terms of literature reviews. With randomized controlled trials, you could be contributing in terms of assigning to different conditions. You could be contributing in terms of delivering particular interventions. And then for systematic reviews and meta-analyses, your work is really literature related and statistical related as well. So all of these different types of, for the animal trials, you're in a lab, you're working with mice, or you're working with whatever other animals that you might be working with given the particular substance area that you're interested in, or biospecimens. So that has a different type of skill set. So basically, you wanting to get involved in research needs you to be aware that there are many different things that qualify as evidence. There is a hierarchy where that evidence is concerned, but there are different skill sets that are required for different types of evidence. And then there are common skill sets that are required for different types of evidence. Now, what is not scientific evidence are the things that are on the right-hand side here of this image. Videos, personal anecdotes, your gut feeling, your parental instincts, somebody that you know, so who says, hey, I read this and this is what the research says. reading things in the newspapers, that doesn't count as evidence either. It's not scientific evidence unless you systematically are looking at archival data. And I'm going to present summarize a project for you later on where I share with you some ways of doing that. The other important qualifier to this hierarchy of scientific evidence is that in medical research, because this is a hierarchy of scientific evidence particular to medical research, in this hierarchy, oh my gosh, Abrielle, I completely forgot to record. Are you recording?
Yes, I am.
Okay, all right. Good, thank you. So this is biomedical. Biomedical science has historically been a quantitative science. Over time, though, biomedical work has realized the importance of integrating qualitative types of information and data. And so when we look at some, particularly the next slides that we're going to look at, you'll get a sense of where qualitative work comes in. So my approach to work is can be broadly categorized. My approach to research could be broadly categorized in health, in translational research. There's a whole other body of work that's related to purely what we call discovery work is translational. Behind translational research is that you move from what we call the lab to the patient or the bedside, and you move into practice and you move into broader community settings. So there's a T0, what we call T1, T2, T3, and T4. So it's basically relating to discoveries that are generated in the lab and clinical studies and trials. When by trials, we mean randomized control trials and studies in human beings. And then the next part of that is really the later phases, T3 and T4, really, how do you move these things? How do you move the science to the community? If you've established by replication that something works in a controlled lab setting, how can you test whether or not it works in a community? And then also, how can you scale, what we call scale up? How can you scale up that practice, that intervention to, for example, across all the parishes in Jamaica, across all the Caribbean countries, in the world, for example? So if you think of the mosquito net, that's what we call one of the greatest best buys in terms of research, because that's an intervention that was able to be applied broadly across multiple countries even. There's a type of research as well, and one of the projects that I'm involved in, Stride, focuses a lot on this type of approach, which is cost effectiveness, because when you're working with implementers of programs and interventions, when you're working with policymakers, what they're really concerned about is the wallet, the pocket. So what they want to know is, how much money is this going to save us as a country, or how much money are we going to have to spend for this? What is our return on investment if we did this, or what are the opportunity costs, etc. So cost effectiveness is another type of approach incorporated in translational science. This is from a wonderful chapter. I'd be very happy to share the chapter with anybody who's interested, by Zollner and Porter. And this gives you a sense of the research phase, some types of research for each of the categories, and then some sample research questions. So you'll see, for example, at T0, which is basic and applied science research, and it's focused really on mechanisms and targets. And some of this may sound really foreign to you. This may be the first time you're hearing some of these terms or phrases. The important thing to remember as you're entering into learning about research and wanting to do more research, that it's okay to not get everything, particularly at the beginning, and that over time what happens is that you absorb things almost by a process of osmosis, particularly when you're working as part of a team. And as I was chatting about with Abrielle a little earlier today, a good bit of what persons need to be oriented to is that science, biomedical research, particularly contemporary biomedical research, is very, very much a team science approach, or not even just biomedical research, health research. Most research that is really trying to go for impact, and by impact we mean the good that we can do in the world. Most of that research, if not all, I would hazard to say, requires a team science approach, a team-based approach to knowledge generation, knowledge synthesis, knowledge presentation. So with T0, for example, looking at mechanisms and targets, which is where you have the animal studies, you have some of the lab studies, a sample research question. So this is taking one particular topic area and showing you how you can have a research question at the T0 level about this area, the T1 level, the T2 level, the T3 level, and the T4 level. So at the T0 level, your research question could be, what are the mechanistic actions of carbohydrate sources on liver and pancreatic tissues in an experimental rat model? So you're really trying to understand the mechanisms at work here. At the T1 level, which is where you're moving from the animal models to the human models, and you're focusing in terms of proof of concept now. So does this thing that worked in the animal model, do I have a proof that this works in a human model? And so this is the early stage of the human clinical trials. A type of research question for that would be, what are the mechanistic actions of ingested carbohydrate sources on liver and pancreatic tissues in humans? Now going at the T2 level, which is translational to patients, you'll see that this is really focused on thinking about not just a small scale human type of model or pre-trial, it's really thinking about the application to clinical settings. So this is types of studies that we call efficacy studies. You'll hear that word when you do the Understanding to Research course too. You'll hear it if you do any type of mentored work with somebody who's working on systematic reviews or meta-analyses. So efficacy studies are different from effectiveness studies. You'll see effectiveness studies are popping up in T3. So T2, the efficacy studies and controlled observational studies, the generation of clinical guidelines, a sample research question for that would be, what is the effect of regulating the amount of carbohydrate sources among pre-diabetic subjects in a highly controlled clinical research setting? So meaning you have to ensure that you have strong internal validity. Again, a term that you might become more familiar with the more time you spend with research, and definitely when you do that Understanding Research course. So basically, it's almost like a sterile medical environment, because you're making sure that you are testing how much these participants are exposed to, at what dosage, for how long, etc. So it's highly controlled. At T3, which is translation to practice, this is where you have the health application of the evidence-based practice guidelines. And the evidence you would have generated, or not you, not you necessarily, but other researchers in that field of work would have generated. So now you are applying that evidence-based practice guidelines to health practice. So this is what we call effectiveness research. This is dissemination and implementation research. This is health services research. And a sample research question in that same kind of topic area could be, what is the relative effect of diabetic risk factors, for example, A1C, fasting glucose, weight, among pre-diabetic patients in free living conditions when randomized. So you're randomly assigning them to a 6-month diet, which regulates carbohydrates, versus a 6-month usual diet comparison condition. And then at the T4 level, translation to community. This is when you go even further now. You're saying that you've done that effectiveness research among a community-based sample, for example. Now you're thinking in terms of population health. How can you influence population health? Again, this is where you have dissemination and implementation research. And again, that's a term that may be very, very new to you. And so we can talk more about that as well. And you'll have some examples, because as I mentioned, my program of work and my approach to research is very squarely within this area. This is where you have scale up as well, and where you really try to spread your research findings from those effectiveness studies. And again, you don't have to be the one that would have done those effectiveness studies, but you're now applying the findings, and you're really aiming for population health impact. So a sample research question is, what is the degree to which, can you hear me still? I think you can. Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. What is the degree to which nutrition professionals in community health clinics can adopt, implement, and maintain an evidence-based program to encourage healthy carbohydrate modifications among at-risk clients? So you see, you can have an area of work, and as a researcher, you could be really wanting to just be in the lab working with animals, or you could really just be wanting to do small scale, early stage clinical trials, just work with a few people. Or you could really be wanting to think about clinical settings. You could be wanting to think about community settings. You work in public health care, and you really are interested in how does this work in the Sarah region versus the NERA region. You might be really interested in really, how can I get the American Heart Association guidelines on the best practice for hypertension control? How can I get that done in the parish of Kingston, or parishes of Kingston and St. Andrew? And so that you could be really working on very different types of things, and there are different skill sets. It's really about what you are drawn to. So I think that's one of the first things that I really encourage you to pay attention to is, where are you drawn to? What type of task, what type of setting did you visualize when you were thinking about research, or what is ideal to you when you're thinking about research? So again, just wanted to reiterate the benefits and the need for translational science. And this is from the Vanderbilt Medical Translational Science Institute. So what exactly is translational science? Translational science evolves because often what we had been seeing was that there was the world of academia, and then there was the world of health practice. And what was happening was that academia was operating in its own silo, and it was feeling pretty good about itself. Oh yes, we're doing such impressive studies, such great work. But when it came time to think about, does the community that really is supposed to be the target beneficiary of this topic that we're studying, this area that we're studying, are they actually getting the intervention that we're saying works well, was statistically significant, we've seen great effects across multiple randomized control trials? Or was it just taking ages? So translational science was a way to think about really having comprehensive pictures of programs of research, so that you moved from observations in the lab or the clinic or the community into thinking about how do you really improve the health of individuals and communities. And so those are building blocks, the T0, the T1, T2, T3, and T4. So now I'm going to transition a bit. I'm going to talk with you about CARE, which is where I work, as Abrielle described. CARE is the Caribbean Institute for Health Research. It was formerly called, before I continue with this, do you all have any questions so far? Because this is now I'm going to give you some examples of the things that I'm doing, the things that some of my colleagues are doing. So before we jumped into that, in terms of applying some sense of those principles that we talked about, does anyone have any questions? Okay, if not, I'll just continue then. So CARE was established in, and Abrielle, since I'm full screen, I can't see if there are questions in the chat. So if you see them, if you could signal to me by just letting me know, jumping in at any point in time. So CARE was established in 1999, and what it did, what that establishing meant was that it brought together independent research units on the UE campus. So it brought together under one umbrella the Tropical Metabolism Research Unit and the Sickle Cell Unit that was in Jamaica at that time, still is, and the Chronic Disease Research Center in Barbados. And at that time as well, thanks to the leadership of Professor Rainford Wilkes, who just received a national honor in the Heroes Day celebrations, the Epidemiology Research Unit was then created. So the initial objectives, the founding objectives of CARE, and as we're actually in our process of our annual scientific meeting this week, so we're refining things in an ongoing conversation about what exactly are our areas of focus, what are the sub-themes under our major themes, do we need to combine any? How can we think about the projects that researchers and research teams at the institutes are actually doing? So I'm just saying that as a context to let you know that even these objectives, etc., research is dynamic, and research institutes are supposed to be dynamic because they're supposed to be responding to the context in which they're based. So the objectives were to increase the output of research in major areas affecting the health of our Caribbean peoples, and to increase the number of trained research scientists that are working in health, and to facilitate the uptake of research into policy, programs, and practice. So you'll see here some pictures. These actually need to be updated because we now have brand new signs at our campus in Mona. Well, not brand new. We actually they're about a year old at this point in time. So you should see a sign if you're going around the ring road of the UE Mona campus, and you pass the juicy beef patties, and you pass the geography unit, and right opposite where the cafe is, I forget what it's been renamed to now, you'll see CARE across the road. And the two units there for CARE are the sickle cell unit on the left-hand side and the epidemiology research unit on the right-hand side. If you're going around the hospital ring road, you'll see there a little bit before the ER section, you'll see the Tropical Metabolism Research Unit. And then in Barbados, we have the Sir George Alleyne Chronic Disease Research Center. Our director, our new director, our last director demitted office in August this year, and Professor Marshall Teller-Reid assumed leadership for the Institute. You'll see a picture of him here. I'm sure some of you will actually, if you haven't already been exposed to his teaching, he will be teaching at least a couple modules in the Understanding Research course. And at CARE are 3 key themes. And as I just mentioned, we're actually this week, Monday through Thursday this week. So up until 12:30, 1 p.m. today, we were in our 3rd day of meetings related to this. Our themes in our annual scientific meeting, we're thinking about whether or not these 3 themes reflect and are the best articulation of what we're doing. As our different research units and different projects within our research units, or whether we need to further refine them. And so you may see, if you look on the website a month or 2 from now, you might see that our 3 themes, research areas, may look a little bit different from what you're seeing here. But at this point, many our projects could really be classified in terms of early life exposures in health and development, interventions, evaluation and implementation, and biological expressions of disease. I am based in the epidemiology research unit, as Abrielle shared. This is a somewhat dated picture of a lot of the staff of the epidemiology research unit. And again, I wanted to emphasize the importance of thinking of doing research as a team-based endeavor. So all of these folks and others that are not on the slide that have come on board as part of the Institute, we all collaborate in one way or another. So in terms of the projects at CARE in which I am currently involved, or which I'm leading, I lead the first 3 for Jamaica. There's STRIDE, Strengthening Responses to Dementia in Developing Countries, that was funded by the UK's Global Challenge Research Fund, and the funding, and again, you may want to talk about, you may want to explore with me, what does it mean to have a project funded? Why do you need funding, etc.? And why are there end dates on project funding times? Are all projects funded? So you may have a number of questions that you may wish to ask, and I'm open to them. So please feel free to ask. So STRIDE is one of my main projects. Another project, Transdisciplinary Data Assemblages, which is building on another project called Caribbean FOODSCAPES. I'm going to show you some slides for those in a bit. And then the 3rd project, for which we actually just submitted our deliverables to our funder last week, which is the Wellcome Trust, was looking at practicing mindfulness in low and middle income countries with a particular focus on young workers in hospitality and tourism. I'm also involved in just starting off a collaboration with colleagues in Columbia and colleagues at Harvard University who would love to come and spend time with you all on another of these sessions to just give you a sense of tasks that are they really need some help with for this CARICOM neurosurgical initiative. And then also a team member, co-investigator on the Caribbean and South America team-based strategy to control hypertension CATCH, which Professor Marshall Teller-Reid is the principal investigator. And again, you might not even understand those terms. You might not have heard those terms before: principal investigator, co-investigator, etc. So please feel free to ask questions. No question is silly. No question is stupid. And then I'm also a co-investigator in the Living in Full Health or LIFE project, which is a longitudinal study on cancer, cardiovascular disease, and diabetes. So I just wanted to
Sorry,
present some
Dr. Govia.
snapshots. Yes.
There are some questions in the
Sure.
chat.
Go ahead.
Winthrop asks, what are the aspects that most of the funding go to?
Does that mean what topics? Or which part of the research
Yeah, Mike.
process?
Well, he said yes to, I think, the question about.
Okay, so it depends on the funder. So, and again, the funder that you're targeting for your research would depend upon the type of research that you're doing. So somebody who is doing lab-based studies is not going to be applying to the same funding mechanism that somebody who's doing policy or cost effectiveness studies is going to be applying to, because those are very different types of research. In the United States, one of the largest funding bodies is the National Institutes of Health, which have sub-institutes like the National Heart, Lung, and Blood and Sleep Institute, National Institute for Mental Health, National Institute for Research on Minority Populations. There are National Cancer Institute. There are many sub-institutes of NIH, which is the main US funding body for health research. And so they would fund things related to, depending upon, again, and each body and each grant call has also specific research mechanisms as well. So in NIH, there's what we call the R01 grant, which is the huge grant, which is millions of dollars, US dollars, and goes for at least 5 years. So an R01 grant would fund and could fund multiple aspects of a research, a program of research, or a particular project. It could fund the person, it will need to fund the personnel to do the project management and coordination. It would need to fund some aspects of the investigators' percent effort, which is another term that's specific to working in research and grants. It would need to fund the actual things that need to happen to get the research done, the field research, the field work. It would need to fund the equipment, it would need to fund the supplies, it would need to fund workshops, it would need to fund various different things. So that a mechanism, whatever the aspects of research that a particular funding mechanism would fund would be varying with the particular mechanism, but also with what the project is focusing on, the duration of the project, etc. So for example, the Welcome Grant that I just talked about was a very short project, 6 months, and it was related to evidence synthesis. So no new data collection, no primary data collection, just synthesizing related evidence, related studies, and seeing what was the status of the evidence. And evidence, the body of evidence that we were interested in was the mindfulness-based interventions, particularly those that have been conducted in low and middle income countries. And what we saw was that there were very few actually conducted in low and middle income countries. But that mechanism, because it was for a very short period of time, it's much less than, say, a multi-million-dollar thing. It's just 45,000 British pounds to fund the work to get those deliverables done. So that, I hope that answered that question.
I have another question.
Mm-hmm.
How do we get funding in Jamaica as medical students, or even after we graduate?
Well, medical students, it would be more challenging for you to get funding because, again, and go back to that first slide that I showed you, remember there is just like there's a hierarchy of evidence, the truth is that there's a hierarchy of when it comes to funding opportunities, who gets them. and it's typically an experienced researcher that would get some funding. There are some small pots of money, some small mechanisms that may particularly target student researchers. Those tend to target though people who are doing their masters or people who are doing their doctorates. But if there are also pots of funding for people who are doing medical degrees, but they have to be linked to a broader team, at least one person who is supervising them, so that whoever is funding that can be confident that this person is not just, the money is going to be a good investment. Um, at UE, I know that there were, I don't know if it still exists given the state that UE is in right now. Um, but there are small grants for students who are conducting research toward a degree, the research that is related to a degree completion. There's also some small pots of money, so you could be part of a team again, linked to a department or an institute that is focusing on research, and you're clarifying, you are budgeted for as a student, as part of the project budget being presented. And again, it depends upon your area of work. So these funding bodies that I've been speaking about, they're national funding bodies, or they're institution-based funding bodies. But there are some opportunities to get funding, for example, through the private sector. I mean, it's a little bit trickier, and you tend to need to show a serious way that this is going to have to benefit those stakeholders. But there are creative ways of thinking about getting funding for things that you're interested in pursuing.
Thank you very much for answering that question. There's another question about, are these projects only for Jamaican students or students from another country? Or students from other countries can also join, and that is in referral to the STRIDE.
Oh, these projects, STRIDE is happening in 7 different countries, middle income countries. Sorry about that. And the Jamaica team, we can, if there are students who wish to be involved, who wish to volunteer, there's certainly tasks that we can find for you to assist with. And the other projects that are on this slide, for example, the CARICOM Neurosurgical Initiative, that is really meant to be across all CARICOM countries. So if there are students who are in another Caribbean country that you are aware of who may be interested in participating, please do let us know. These projects that are on this slide here, I'm sharing them with you because as either the principal investigator or a co-investigator, I know that we are doing work in Jamaica for these projects, and so can really benefit from Jamaican students participating or helping.
Okay, thank you again.
You're welcome.
Question, how do you juggle all of those projects, all 6 projects?
Having an amazing team. I'm going to show you some pictures of my team members, but you can't do these things alone. So it's really important to understand my philosophy is, and different, you'll realize that different people have different leadership styles and different management styles, but my style is extremely team-based. So I recognize from the outset so it's really important for me to get team members who know things that I don't know, who can do things that I don't know how to do. That I can, I can provide the sense of the scope for the project and what needs to be done, and guide and direct and everything, and contribute to specific things in which I am stronger. But it's really important for all of these projects. I mean, for example, the LIFE project, we're collaborating with the Fox Cancer Research Center in Philadelphia. For the CATCH project, we're collaborating with Tulane University in New Orleans, and with a university in Columbia. So it's really about getting, not just at the individual team level, people that are complementary, but thinking about your broader projects, partners that are complementary and that have skill sets. So for example, with project number 5 there, the CATCH project, because our infrastructure at UE is not as robust when it comes, and not as peopled when it comes to the administrative management of large scale grants. And the CATCH project is a project that was funded through National Heart, Lung and Blood Institute, as I might have mentioned. And it's a 5-year long project. And so it required, across 2 core countries, requires incredible administrative management. And so we're collaborating with Tulane because they have an amazing track record of such administrative management, and an amazing track record in terms of research projects and delivery of high quality research as well. So by the grace of God, and with incredible team members and incredible partners, and taking time out and realizing that, work is important. And as strange as this may sound to you as medical students, work is not everything. So it's really important to stay in balance as well.
Yes, that is a very, very good point. Very important to stay balanced. There's a question like, do you recommend teaming up with classmates and then finding a senior lecturer in order to, like, if a student, or a group of students have a particular research project, they would have to find a senior researcher in the faculty?
Well, I would say there are 2 ways of entering this, right? You may have a burning issue that you really want to address. And so you and your colleagues may collaborate on that, and bring your idea, like in a 1 to 2 page concept note, to a lecturer or senior lecturer, faculty member. Or you can say, I really want to gain some skills in literature synthesis. I really want to gain some skills in management of lab samples. I really want to gain some skills in recruitment of participants. I really want to gain some skills in development of standard operating procedure protocols for projects. I really want to gain some skills in conducting interviews. I really want to gain some skills in administering questionnaires. I really want to gain some skills in synthesizing policy briefs. You could start from that side as well, or you could start from another way. I'm really interested in nutrition related research. I'm really interested in mental and neurological conditions related research. I'm really interested in cancer related research. I'm really interested in diabetes related research. And you could then identify, if you're coming from either one of those 2, you identify a researcher at your institute that is doing work in that area, or that has a particular skill set that you're wanting to cultivate. And you then say to them, hey, and you should be prepared when you go to them. So I recommend strongly that you have a updated CV, that you have a copy of your unofficial transcript, and that you're able to articulate whether it is that there are specific skill sets that you're aiming to develop, or it's a particular substantive area that you're really a novice in research and you really want to gain some skills. So you could approach it from that way, where you identify somebody, and so that requires you doing some work, You look up who's doing cancer-related research in Jamaica. And I really, without being biased, I have to say that our institute is really the leader in Jamaica and arguably in the Caribbean in terms of health research. So I would say, first of all, check out CARE, look at CARE's website, see if there's anybody who's any project that's doing something or in a particular topic area that you're interested in, and try to reach out via email to one of the researchers for that project. If you are uncertain about who's doing what or whether that's the most up-to-date thing, please feel free to email me and I'll be very happy to point you in the direction of relevant persons.
Hold on. There's one more question. Okay, what exactly does the CARICOM neurosurgical initiative entail?
Yeah, so what these researchers are wanting to do is to develop a registry of neurological trauma and neurosurgical um, various types of neurosurgical interventions that are being done in countries across the Caribbean, the Latin American and Caribbean region. And there are multiple aspects of that, and I can share for those who are interested in that one. In offline, I can also share some background information on that as well. But that's the group that those colleagues really are interested in chatting with you all, because they need a lot of help in terms of getting things done. So I'd be very happy to come back and do another session with you all when they have some time. Should I proceed now?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay. So the Caribbean Foodscapes project, I'm going to just give you a snapshot of two key projects that I mentioned. The Caribbean Foodscapes project, this was an interdisciplinary team of investigators, and we were really interested in bringing a historical perspective in understanding what is happening in terms of why is it that we've evolved to having such high rates of overweightedness and obesity. And so we looked at newspaper sources. We also interacted and had interviews with key stakeholders. We looked at health archival, quantitative health data as well. And what our key findings were from that was that there was a wider availability of unhealthy food options in the city since, and by the city we mean Kingston, since 1962. In that period of time too, from post-independence to present, we've seen increasing rates of obesity and overweightedness, and that's particularly in children under 5, which is very concerning. And it really contributes to an increasing burden of non-communicable diseases, particularly diabetes and hypertension. And so the workshops that we conducted and the engagements with stakeholders really suggested to us the need for gender and place-based frameworks as important steps for our work to assure sustainable relationships. So this is another type of task, for example, that people don't normally associate with research, but it's integral for research. For example, event planning. Schedule events. So sometimes people come in with this almost in the clouds, angel singing hallelujah sense of research, but don't really realize that sometimes research involves very practical tasks as well that would benefit from your help and assistance. From that project, we evolved another project. We got funding again for this one. This is funded by the Arts and Humanities Research Council in the UK. This one, the Caribbean Foodscapes, which is the first part of the work, was funded by the Economic and Social Research Council and the Arts and Humanities Research Council in the UK. And this one is funded exclusively by the Arts and Humanities Research Council. And really what this project came from, and what I'm trying to point out to you is how research builds. It's meant to build one thing on top of another. You don't just do something and just forget about it. The whole purpose of doing research, arguably, is to make a difference and to have impact, right? And so for doing that, you develop what's called a program of research. And you have certain building blocks or certain complementary parts, like pieces of a puzzle. So when you stand back, you can see, okay, this is what my program of research is really about. So the Caribbean Foodscapes grant really pointed out to us the need to collate that there were actually data that exist. There are data that exist, but these data are in very siloed places. So they're not just in Ministry of Health and Wellness or at Caribbean Institute for Health, but they may be in the Urban Planning Institute. They may be in Ministry of Agriculture. They may be with non-governmental organizations. So we realize a need to really identify the sources of the data and to bring them together. Next year, we're having a virtual conference, Global Food Systems in Local Contexts, and it's really about thinking through historical perspectives and approaches to understanding contemporary food systems challenges. If you are doing or are part of any team that is doing work related to this, please feel free to reach out. Now, I'm going to share as well some information about STRIDE and the various types of tasks that we have been involved in. We convened and curated a national advisory group because STRIDE is about really influencing dementia care, improving dementia care. And so it's really important for us to show up in different places. Now you'll see in one of the next slides that I show you how we're pivoting our showing up. But that meant, and again, this is part of research that sometimes people do not normally identify as doing research. But it's how you reach to your target users or your end users. So we've had information tents. We've actually contributed to literally calling out the Minister of Health, which precipitated the meeting that we were able to have with him and his team. But it's really about advocacy as well. So particularly, and again, this is the type of research and work that I do, which is really in that category of translational science, and particularly T3 and T4. That's where my work is squarely located, particularly T4. And it involves being part of things, speaking on documentaries, for example, speaking as part of MOOCs, massive open online courses, speaking at workshops, holding things that like virtual support groups that are meant to benefit our target populations and their carers, and amazing team members from countries all over the world participating in conferences. And these three beautiful ladies at the bottom here are three of my team members. Tiffany is not on this picture, but you'll see here in this picture Rochelle, Janelle, and Marissa, who are key members of the STRIDE team and just of the mental health program, mental and neurological conditions team at CARE that I lead. So we've also pivoted so that we're not just because of COVID and we can't go out and do certain events. We've collaborated with partners such as the National Council for Senior Citizens to develop brief information, public education campaigns. So advice for caregivers during COVID, managing COVID-19 stress. We keep producing a newsletter. We synthesize, and we have experts, Rochelle and Tiffany, especially expert communications persons on the team who are able to do things like synthesizing complex information and then presenting it to our stakeholders, doing something like the COVID-19 in summary series. And then we continue to offer care consultations as part of how we really are intending to benefit persons who we're interested in. And then there are traditional ways that the research is disseminated after it's generated. For example, in the top left-hand corner here, you see we published a systematic review and meta-analysis. And you one of the things that I would like to point out to you on this is you see the number of authors on this, named authors, and then you see "and on behalf of the STRIDE team." So when you have cross-country teams, it's really a large number of researchers and project personnel that are involved. And so that's really important to keep in mind, to remember. I wanted to present to you as well some non-academic, non-traditionally academic ways and research see that our team generated about COVID-19 and long-term care and the long-term care situation in Jamaica. I want to point out to you other things related to this in terms of authorship, and that could be a whole other webinar as well. In medical sciences, the teams are big. In health research, I should say, teams are big, and so the number of authors on a publication from research that has been generated from a particular project tends to be pretty big. It could range from 3 to hundreds of authors. And position of author in the authorship order also matters. So the first author is generally the one that leads the generating of the draft, but the author at the end is what we would call the senior author. And that's the author who has conceptualized the project, who has guided the first author, who contributes in a really substantive way and has generated a lot of the work related to the substantive area of focus. You'll see here that there's also, our team did a blog, produced a blog as well about tips for conducting virtual focus groups in low resource settings. So those are multiple ways that you can share research findings from research. And then another way is by participating in conferences and in meetings. And you'll see that our team is actually scheduled to speak at the World Economic Forum's lecture series in January about that project that I was mentioning on mindfulness in low and middle income countries. So I wanted to just share very briefly here a list of some of the past projects for which data are available. If you're interested, you can be in touch with me and I'll follow up with further information. I wanted to just share with you thinking of that T3, especially T4 area that my work fits in. You can see that you've probably gotten a sense of that there are multiple and intersecting or overlapping areas of focus: policy, health services, health systems, and also really focusing on getting, not just generating the data, but disseminating the data, and through non-traditional sources, non-traditional routes, at least non-traditional for academia as it's been to date. And then my group really tends to be very applied, very interdisciplinary, uses mixed methods, so both quantitative methods and relevant approaches to analysis of those data. and qualitative, including looking at textual data, whether it's archival, or newspapers and content analysis, or in primary data collection, interviews, focus groups, the transcripts from those that are generated, etc. And we are really very strong, as you've gotten a sense, in terms of social media and branding. And we spend a lot of time too thinking about our process as a team and how to make things even smoother. It's important to keep in mind too that one of the ways in which you could plug into what is happening and opportunities, including some funding opportunities, there are small grants as well for students, as per one of the questions, is to join a professional association and or to be part of other networks like advocacy networks if you're so inclined, that are related to a particular area of interest. So I wanted to just share with you the two that I'm involved with there. And then just to summarize again, there are multiple types of responsibilities that could be part of your portfolio of what you are doing when you're first learning to be a research team member, when you're first kind of building your research skills muscles. Those include project management, event planning, social media management, group or research team management, engaging with stakeholders, doing desk reviews, desk research, doing field work, or doing data analysis, or doing writing up of findings. And I wanted to just share as well some of my values in terms of what I look for in team members. And I think what many, well, actually certain different people have different things that they prioritize. So it's really important to when you're seeking out opportunities, that you keep in mind too what you need and what your strengths are. Because, for example, you may not thrive in a research team that doesn't really have a consistent checking in culture like mine might, or you might actually prefer that, more of a hands-off type of just do the task and then check me back in a month type of approach. So you may also be somebody that needs regular or ongoing feedback, or you need a lot of time when you're doing something. So it's important to think about the culture as well, not just to see at first, oh, this is a really interesting topic and this is exactly along the lines of what I want to do, but is that a good group fit for you, a good fit for you in terms of group and the team members?
I'm sorry.
So if you
There's a
are
question.
interested, yes, go ahead, Abrielle.
Someone is asking, as medical students, which aspect of the team do you think we would be best at managing or doing?
Everybody's different, so I don't think that there's a carte blanche what medical students are best at. I think it really is a process of thinking through, again, fit. Yeah. So it could be that you're interested in one of the sickle cell projects group. One is sickle cell groups projects, and they're doing a small clinical trial with just 10 participants, and you might be really good at, for example, participant recruitment or participant retention, which would involve following up with them, or taking their measurements, or administering their samples. Or you might be somebody who's just really much better with work events planning, or documents, working with documents. So you have to think about what your skill sets are, and where you are naturally drawn to. Because one of the things that I really want you to get from today's session is that there is a place for all different types of skills and orientations if you in terms of research. So don't feel like you need to contort yourself and fit into some box. Like if you don't want to be doing work in a lab with rats, you don't have to be doing that. That's not the only thing that research is. If you don't want to be working with policymakers or stakeholders, you don't have to do that because that's not the only thing research is. So there's in that T0 to T4 organizing, you can think about where you're most oriented, and then you could think about, what types of skill sets do you have, what type of skill sets do you not have or not as strong in that you really want to cultivate, and how can you do that?
Thank you very much for that. One more question. What are the key things medical students need to start an original research project?
It depends on the area of research, but generally an extreme amount of initiative, a deep knowledge of the substantive area of focus, a strong methodological background, particularly in terms of the research design that you want to use to conduct the study, to collect the data, and a sense of how you need to manage the data as well. But I would say that before you jump into thinking about designing original research, that you find out first what has been done and what is being done in that particular area. Because sometimes people come out, guns blazing, thinking, I'm the only person that has thought about this. And sometimes you may be, sometimes you really may be, but sometimes it's because there hasn't been sufficient canvassing of what is happening. So I would really encourage, one of the skills that you need to have is a thorough an ability to do a thorough reconnaissance mission of that particular area first.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for answering all the questions. Just like to say, just like to ask if there's any other question before we wrap up? And you can use your mic.
Yes, good afternoon. I don't remember if you gave a list of all the projects that your specific group is doing, but where would I find that?
You could go to goviaresearch.com and you'll see most of them there. I think I need to update the website as well. But that has most of the projects. I think the Catch project is not there yet. So I have to put that there, and the mindfulness project is not there. But that should give you a sense of some of the things that my team and I have going on. And you could also, if there's a particular topic area that you're interested in that isn't there, you can always send an email and ask, let me know that that's what you're interested in, and ask if that's something that I do work on or anybody that I'm aware of does work in that area.
All right,
Please
thanks.
reach out.
I'm not sure how to spell the website. Could you leave it in the chat so everybody
Sure,
can?
I can do that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I guess there's no further questions. And you guys can feel free to message me if you want me to ask Dr. Govia any other question. And I'd just like to thank you all for coming out, and a very, very big special thanks to Dr. Govia for taking her time out to present to us today. And to our participants, you guys are given, priority to any of our upcoming allocations for any research projects that we are invited to participate. So it's very good that you guys came out today. And if you had used the registration link and received the email, then you would have been privileged to get a certificate of participation for this webinar. And it will be very good because in the coming months, we're going to be getting some research projects and pairing students with tutors. And in the far future, we're really hoping to have an exchange program where we send few students overseas and receive students from other universities overseas. So there's going to be an exchange program coming up. But because of COVID, it was really we really didn't get to do it. But I'm sure that as time goes by and things start to settle down a bit, that we can be able to start that project. I encourage you guys to come out to any further webinars that we have in the future, and we'll be sure to let you know and communicate. Also join our WhatsApp group. I'll try to send the link. Join our WhatsApp group so you can be up to date with any information that we will provide. So yes, I think that is it. Okay.
Well, I want to thank you all for having extended the invitation. First of all, it's been really lovely to spend some time with you and to engage with you, to share with you about what our institute is doing and what my team is also doing, and to talk with you in general about the research process. I really encourage you to follow this passion for research. Research is such fun to me. It really is an opportunity to explore things that you're curious about, to be a detective, to follow clues, and then to be, when you're reporting on it, to be like a lawyer where you're presenting your arguments and you're talking about what your findings, what are suggesting. So I really encourage you, commend you first of all for being involved in this as an extracurricular activity, and want to encourage you, if you are interested, there is a place and a space for you in some team, on some project, and for the contributions that you can make. So please keep at it.
Yes, thank you very much. And I'd also like to add on that point, I don't think it was covered in the last webinar that we had about the importance of medical research. Well, importance of research in general, but especially for those students who are going overseas, whether to America or, anywhere apart from Jamaica, having your name on a research project, on an article, really gives you an edge, especially when you're vying for placement for residency. And it also, also gives you an edge for when you're, applying for jobs, because it has shown that you're competent and that you are a contributor. So please continue to be on this path of research, and we, the SCORE committee, will definitely help you to join a project. And if you have an original project, we will try to, help you out in that regard. But I think the best thing to do is to find a team, especially since we're, new at this. We can learn a lot from joining one of those teams. Okay, so thank you guys.
Yeah.
And
Abrielle, can I just one final thing, just based on what
okay.
you were saying there? I think it would be helpful for you all to have a session too on understanding publication in academia. So I would encourage you to try to have a session like that, so you understand how you can get involved in terms of being in an authorship listing, the placement in ordering, and why, particularly when you're now starting out, it's quite okay to be just one name in a long line of names. You don't have to be first, you don't have to be second. You definitely are not going to be the senior author at the end. So to understand all of those things, to understand the publication process, that often if you're submitting a completed work to a journal for consideration, and it's not a journal that you're paying a fee for, that often the timeline from submission to review to final acceptance can be as long as a year or more. That you understand that there are some of these open source journals that the authorship team has to pay like $3,000 to submit an article to, and so it's important that the team is clear about which are their target journals and those types of things. So I think there are concepts that you talk about, but I think it would be really important for those of you who are really committed to research and see this as a fundamental aspect of component of what you want to be doing, that you understand all different aspects of it. So understanding the publication process and authorship and principles for being a named author on something, versus you're a research assistant and contributing in a particular supportive role, when that does or does not give you the merit for authorship, etc. I think all of those types of nuances are really important, because yes, it's wonderful if your name is on a publication, but you need to understand too what is involved, what would be required for your name to be on a publication as well.
Okay, thank you very much. That is a very good point. And I'll be sure to try to get that done. Right? That's a very good idea. Okay. Thank you guys again for coming, and thank you, Dr. Govia. Have a great day, guys.
Thanks everybody. Bye. Enjoy the rest of your night.